Hi everyone, whether you're in the room or joining us on the live stream or you're watching this at a later date, you're very welcome. We, the NTA's Women in Film and TV Ireland and Screen Guilds of Ireland, are absolutely delighted to have you here and to be hosting this event and platforming this really important subject matter, menopause in the screen sector. Today's event, Menopause on the Screen, a dual lens from perception to representation, is part of the wider menopause programme for the screen sector. It's a chance to reflect on how menopause is experienced in our industry and how it's expressed in the stories we tell. This morning we had writer Jennifer Davidson lead a practical creative workshop exploring how menopause is portrayed on screen and how we can move beyond stereotypes towards more honest, layered storytelling. Now we have our panel discussion, moderated by Dr. Susan Liddy, President of Women in Film and TV International and Chair of Women in Film and TV Ireland. Together with our panellists, we'll explore how culture, industry structures and creative habits shape what we see on screen and what happens behind the scenes. We'll also consider how we can build more supportive, inclusive practices within productions. Later today, we'll screen Solo Mama, a quiet but powerful film about a woman in her 40s who chooses to become a single parent via sperm donation. It's a story about autonomy, choice, and the space to change, all themes that resonate with today's conversation. So you might ask, why talk about menopause in the screen sector? And the answer is very simple. Menopause affects half of the population. Globally, half of the population. And yet it's rarely portrayed with depth or authenticity. It can be a time of real physical and psychological challenge, and acknowledging that is key to putting the right supports in place. But it's also a time that many going through menopause are in their most capable years, bringing experience, insight and confidence to their work. And these realities sit side by side. Writer Sally Wainwright, creator of Riot Women, has spoken about this duality, the intensity of the experience, but also the clarity and the strength that come with it. And yet, on screen, menopause is still often reduced to a single moment, a throwaway line, or a symbol of decline. What if we offered it the same narrative complexity we give other life stages, as a time of transition, a time of autonomy and visibility? Today is about opening up that conversation from the page to the screen to the production culture behind it. Because if we don't talk about it, we can't change it. Thank you to Jennifer, to Susan, and to our panellists, Max, Deborah, Janicke, and Louise, for generously sharing their time and insight. It shows real care for people and for the future of the sector.
Then there's the whole emotional practice that we go through, which is, the anxiety, the loss of confidence, because your anxiety is driving that lack of confidence and the loss of confidence. There's all of the stuff that Louise was talking about, that we have this thing of push through, don't ever give up, don't ever show weakness, particularly because, the vast majority of people who go through menopause identify as female, and as a cisgender woman, I'm going to talk about women. That's not to exclude other people who may have a different binary or sexuality, gender and identification. But I think the main reason that menopause is so taboo is because it is the end of your reproductive usefulness and it's the end of your fuckability. And that, I think, because we live in such a hegemonic society, has become this thing that defines who we are as women, and therefore we start to lose identity, we start to lose visibility, and it's very hard to pull yourself back from that. And I think that's the main reason why it's taboo, because we're no longer sexually attractive or sexually useful.
That's great, thanks for that. And I think we can say very clearly that there is nothing too controversial that could be said today, because I think we have a willing audience to hear what we want to say. And just to come back to something you said, which I should say to start with, is I am aware, looking down here, we're all white women sitting here, and that's not ideal. And I know that also menopause impacts many people and we could have quite a different mix of audience had things worked in another way at another time. So I do think that's very important to say. Can I come to you, Janicke, because you have experience in Norway, and am I right in saying that you have some experience in France too? Do you live in France?
I live in France, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about maybe attitudes to menopause, as far as you understand them, in both those places?
Yeah. France and Norway has very two opposite cultures. I mean, everything is very, very different from the two countries, and also how women are seen. And I think menopause in France is very much a taboo topic still, unfortunately. At the same time, I think French women are more open to taking medication to relieve the symptoms, whilst as in Norway, it's the opposite. I think it's more of an open topic, but women feel the need to be this kind of superwoman who can deal with it without medication. So it's two very different.
And are women in Norway having to speak about it openly?
I believe so. Yeah.
So it's quite different to France in that respect.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And but I grew up with a mom who is a nurse, and she was working in a nursing home, and everything about life and death and everything in between was always very natural at home. We never discussed body or how you look at home. That was very much a taboo at home. And I'm very grateful for that, and I think that's also very important in our attitude towards women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janicke. Deborah, can I come to you now? What about the UK experience? I'm just wondering, the ease that we're speaking about, is that something that you recognise as part of the UK experience as well?
Absolutely, historically, it's been a busy time for the world of menopause in the UK for the past few years. So things have been changing. I started working on this topic around 2022, and I think the threads of change were already quite visible before then. So I mean, and in many different areas, like politically, you know, there's been some MPs campaigning for example, to include HRT on free prescriptions. So it's at that level. It's also in terms of education. There are campaigns that menopause should be part of the sort of PSHE curriculum, which it now is. And the sort of the world of celebrity, which is another area that I'm interested in. What I was kind of really curious about was the amount of women who are public figures who are coming forward and sort of sharing what I would call menopause memoirs, and being really candid about very difficult experiences of menopause in a way which we would not have seen a generation ago. So all of these things were happening at the same time, and so I think there has been a real momentum. Menopause is much more visible in all kinds of ways in the UK. But we have to be really careful thinking that means that that's equitable, because it's not. And we can see that, for example, prescriptions for HRT have really increased. And HRT isn't for everyone, so this is not kind of to sell HRT, but they have increased. But we can see that they've increased in areas which are largely more populated by sort of wealthy, we can say more middle class and kind of white areas. So we can see that HRT has not been accessed, is still not accessed in anything like the same numbers by economically disadvantaged people, women, or women of colour. So I think we have to be really careful sort of looking at the landscape and thinking, hey, things are getting better, maybe at one level they are, but we have to also be asking, where are the communities where that's not reaching. So another project that I'm sort of involved with at the moment is, for example, doing work with Caribbean women in the UK. It's also about culture, because we know that some cultures, it's even more taboo. We need to recognise that and work with that as well. Yeah.
So celebrity interest doesn't necessarily change anything. Does it bring it to the fore, though? Does it help in the breaking of taboo?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it does is help with sort of destigmatisation at one level, yeah, because we just become more used to seeing the word menopause out, and that in itself is an important shift. At the same time, the counter position is that there's a kind of re-stigmatisation, because some people are nervous that when we talk about how difficult menopause is, you know, the more we're going to make it actually counterproductively, perhaps more difficult for women in the workplace, because, you know, employers get nervous about, oh, midlife women going to be, you know, troublesome. So there's a kind of split sort of response to this in some ways. Of course, at one level, we can welcome the fact that more of these conversations are happening. But there is some sort of anxiety that actually what we're doing is, in the process, selling more sort of worrisome idea that menopause is by its nature going to be complicated, difficult, and like, you know, horrendous thing that you have to go through as a woman. And there's some concern that that will make young women nervous about what's ahead in a way which perhaps we don't want to do. So it's about education in a much broader sense, I think, as well. Yeah.
Well, you know, we do think, don't we, of menopause as something that happens in midlife, or inverted commas, older women. So I'd be very interested now just to turn for a minute to Louise and Max, because you both had an experience of menopause at an age that would be considered younger. And I'd just like you to talk about that experience, and particularly that experience for you as somebody working in the screen industries, because like we are here about the screen industries today. We know by the way that the problems, the challenges it faces are not different to every single other organisation out there, but there are some differences. So Louise, can I start with you? Would you talk a little about your experience?
Yeah, and so I had a baby when I was 42, and then I, you know, to go back to the doctor, just kind of talking through kind of what my next year was going to be like, and had done blood tests, and she was like, "Oh, you're right in the middle of menopause," and I was like, "Oh, great, this is brilliant." I just was home to a tiny baby, and now I'm about to start taking HRT, and I hadn't been, as they would say, feeling myself, or kind of not feeling it, and then. And I had been taking treatment kind of for fertility as well, so I think I had kind of done certain things kind of to my kind of, and again, just pushing through, just trying to get through it and working, and maybe just kind of not paying attention too much to what was kind of going on. And obviously, throughout my kind of late 30s, I definitely, now looking back on it, there were times where I had a lot going on, and trying to buy a house and just trying to live life, and not really kind of paying attention to myself, and realising that I'm kind of been dragging myself through the other end of perimenopause, and really not not looking after myself in a way that I probably should have been. And all the signs were there when I kind of realised it. It was just like an almost like a moment when she said it, I was like, oh my God, I had not kind of allowed myself to kind of step back and pay attention to what was going on in my life, other than just try and keep my head down and get through the day to day. And it was hard enough to kind of, you know, keep working and trying to buy a home and all these things that kind of take for granted that you can do, that were I was finding quite difficult at that time, and just kind of trying to get on with it. So I'm kind of only kind of giving myself time now just to look back at that and actually deal with that retrospectively, which is, I don't know if that's worse or not, because it would have been probably better to kind of be feeling it at the time and just go through it, and then it's almost like I'm dealing with it in flashbacks.
Right.
Which is kind of
so you just, as you kind of referenced at the start, you just pushed your way through everything.
Yeah, like head down, right through.
Yeah, and did you discuss it with anyone at that time? No.
Hadn't kind of, didn't really understand, kind of wasn't really paying attention to. Again, there was so much other stuff kind of going on. I wasn't really had the knowledge to understand that maybe it was something else. So, you know, and I would be regular with the doctor. I do stuff, and no one else kind of said maybe there might be this or it might be that, and I wasn't maybe keen enough to talk about it. You know, and open up and say, I'm not feeling that great.
But I wonder too, was there the expectation that you couldn't be that because you were a certain age?
Absolutely. So I would have been, obviously, had kind of, I don't know how long, I guess the timeline is very, kind of, it's hard to understand what that would be, but having started taking in HRT then at 42. I don't know how long previous to that was the run up to kind of to that, maybe whether it was a year or two. It's really kind of thinking back on certain symptoms, I can be like, oh, that's what that was for, or feeling certain ways, and just kind of being able to have a little, I would kind of, being able to just kind of get on with it. But I don't know what the timeline again is involved.
Max, you have had similar in one way, but maybe more extreme, would that be?
Yeah, it's pretty extreme, all right. It was a funny thing. I didn't join the dots until I was sitting one day in Caroline's car park, and I got off the phone call that I was on, and my husband had left RTE Radio 1 on my car. I hate RTE Radio 1 with vengeance, and it just isn't my scene. And Joe Duffy was doing that 5-day programme that he did around menopause, and Sally Ann Brady from the Irish Menopause had started it. And I burst out into tears because the dots finally joined up. I mean, at that point, I was diagnosed at that point as postmenopausal. I was diagnosed in a menopausal state at about 40 and a half, 41. I kind of went into perimenopause at around 32, 33. No idea what was going on. I remember going to one GP and talking about the night sweats that I was having, and she diagnosed me with endometriosis, and I was getting infected during my periods, and that was what was going on. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis because of the joint pain. Everything but what was actually going on for me, and this particular doctor, that very experienced, very old-fashioned, he spotted me one day coming out of the rheumatoid clinic in the primary practice, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm having a blood test because apparently I've got rheumatoid arthritis." And he actually did the blood tests and called me and said, "You're in a postmenopausal state." But told me at that point, "Sure, you're through it now, you don't need the old HRT. The HRT is only for getting through the perimenopause," which is actually not the case. So it was pretty extreme emotionally, physically it was extreme. Emotionally and psychologically, I think it was worse. I became consumed by anxiety, and I became somebody who thought I could not do this job anymore. Didn't help that I was working with a particularly difficult director, who I'm sure a lot of you will know, and I've mentioned his name, but I nearly gave up the business because I genuinely did not think I had the bandwidth or the capacity to be able to do it anymore, because I was so filled with anxiety, heart palpitations, exhaustion all the time, out-of-body experiences where I would be watching myself from above, screaming like a banshee for no particular reason other than I was in the middle of a hormonal storm. My poor family had a terrible time when I was going through it all, and nobody, in that 10 years that went on, nobody said menopause. I had no idea, and I would be pretty educated and knowledgeable when it comes to things like that, but it was never mentioned to me that it was a possibility. And after I got to the point where I had the diagnosis of menopause, then it took 10 years before someone would give me HRT. And the HRT is so crucial for some women, not all, but it's so crucial for some women in order to protect your heart and your brain and your body. And and the big thing is I have heart disease. I put it down to a direct result of early menopause and not having the HRT fast enough. My cholesterol went through the roof, which is another thing that happens to women when you hit menopause, and it's all being put down to your diet and your lifestyle. It was genuinely familial, and then menopause hitting on top of it, then heart disease, then there's all the histamine responses that I've been having, and it's been a long journey. I'm still not through the process of physically getting enough better and much better in an emotional state now on it. But what I have found has been really good is I talk about it a lot. My activism around menopause is more on a personal level.
Legendary, I would say. Legendary, I would say.
I know, I don't think so. I like to talk to women all the time. You'll be talking to crew members, and as a producer, and you'll say to them, "How are you doing?" And they'll say, "Oh God," and I'll say, "Well, that's the fucking menopause, you know that, don't you?" And they kind of go, "Oh, really?" And then you tell them, "Here's somewhere you can go to. This is what happens. This is how it goes. Go talk to this person, and I'll talk to you." And I find that for me has been quite cathartic. because you are trying to help somebody else not go through the same thing, you know, and to share the knowledge is empowerment, I think, for a lot of women.
Yeah. Thanks to both of you for sharing those very personal insights. Deborah, maybe you hold on to the mic there, because I just want to kind of get everyone's response to this. We all know, I guess, that it's really crucially important. But first of all, we want more women at all levels in the industry. That goes without saying here. But it's really very important, I think, when you get women, you have them, they're working, they're experienced, committed workers, you don't want to turn around and lose those women around this period of time, which can happen, and we do hear stories around that. So I suppose what I want to kind of think about for a minute is, you know, why is it, and can we change this, that it's so difficult going through menopause? Is it harder in a very male-dominated industry? I suppose that's the crux of what I want to ask. Is it harder than if you were an industry that had a wider mix of women as part of that? Deborah, do you want to give your, I know you're not working in the industry, but you've done a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think it has to be at one level, but I do think it's partly a kind of wider cultural shift that has to come first, because women need to learn and feel comfortable to talk to other women about it as well, and that's something I do think is changing. But I mean, Susan and I did a little bit of pilot scheme work of speaking with women in the film industry in the UK and Ireland, in the United States, who are perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, about their experiences working in the screen sector. And you know, some of the things that we discovered from that was they not only focused like males dominated, but they kept saying it's a young person's game. There was this kind of repeated reference to it's a young person's game. So admitting to being menopausal is also kind of admitting to your age or being a bit older. And another thing that came up in the same conversation there is this idea that they would say, like, you know, people don't quite realise how old I am. I passed for younger. This idea of passing was really interesting. So they don't want to talk about menopause also because they don't want it to reveal their age. But also this idea that particularly they didn't want to make men feel uncomfortable. So you know, it would be something where they were sort of also carrying the weight of trying to make men feel better about having women in the workplace and women's bodies doing unruly things. So there's so many different sort of factors coming into play together there. I remember one woman saying that even if a conversation came on the radio and maybe she had you know, a son and his friends in the back, that she would feel uncomfortable, and the instinct would be to turn that down. I mean, you know, I don't think these are things that are beyond our comprehension. We may not do them ourselves, but we all know that that's part of the wider culture and the silence around it, really. Yes, in terms of women speaking to other women, it's also the idea that because there weren't that many senior women there who were at that kind of, had been through that menopause because they're at that age and now they're in a senior position. There wasn't that idea of a kind of culture of passing on information. So we did have a few conversations with women and say, right, I kind of met one or two other women and I was able to have a conversation with them and we were able to share stuff. But I think it really is about making that culture as well of women talking to women, which is really important. Like you're saying, Max, is one of the things that's been really clear to me in the work that I've done, which on one hand has been like talking to women that work in the film industry, but also in a kind of international project that I've been part of, where we've been speaking with like migrant women in Sweden and sort of, you know, really sort of, you know, underclass, low-paid women in India. One of the kind of repeated things that comes through in all those contexts is women not knowing in advance, not knowing what symptoms are. And that has been on all classes, all cultures. So anything that we can do to change that is important.
Yes, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Because, you know, we know, it's the fact that this is in your life, it is part of every, so it's not a grubby little secret that you have, it's a part of every woman's life. And you kind of go, how the hell could we not know? How could this not be a subject? But I suppose if you think back, you know, girls getting their period, that's maybe more open than it was now to talk about, but it was a taboo at that stage as well.
And I think that's a really interesting parallel that we can think of there, because certainly in the UK there's been massive campaigns on period poverty, and I just sometimes look like, you know, going to university where I work, and there's, you go to the bathrooms and there's bowls of tampons and towels sitting there, and I'm just like, that's so amazing compared to the culture that I grew up in, like the cultural shift that's taken place there in my lifetime. So yeah, is that hopefully what we're going to see in the conversation?
Janicke, can I come to you for a minute? Because I know that first of all, Janicke's film Solo Mama is showing later on. And congratulations for that, by the way. Every woman director that steps in, we're very, very pleased to hear that. But can I ask you, you know, do you think that having, in a broader sense for a second, a director on set who's a woman, can somehow change the tone a little bit? I mean, is there an openness, a greater openness? And I know we're on topic, we're not generalising here, but I wonder, is there a greater sense that more topics can be spoken about, or more issues can emerge if there is a woman sort of leading? Just break down that male kind of, that maleness or male monopoly, if you like to say.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's easier to treat topics that we can relate to, for sure. I'm just so inspired to listen to you all here, and I absorb everything you say, and it's so important to have women around that can tell you this before, you know, because we always have the internet, but the internet can be a very dangerous place. But consider, when it comes to my film, it was very important to me to cast a female lead that was actually the actual age of what she was playing, which was 45. And I wanted her to look like she was 45.
You see, I think that's the distinction, isn't it? I mean, yeah, because, you know, aging, we're seeing a lot of older women there, but, you know what I mean, it is quite sanitized, isn't it? They're all terribly glamorous, which is a lovely thing, but not every single, that's not a kind of a great thing if that's the only standard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's my fear, is that that's going to be the standard, that you have to look like Nicole Kidman or Demi Moore when you're in your 50s or 60s. And I think Baby Girl and The Substance, I mean, it's great that those films come out, but it shouldn't be the only portraying of women at that age. And I'm thinking, what if the lead of Baby Girl would be a more normal-looking woman doing these daring sex scenes? Would it be possible? Or do you have to have a 25-year-old body to do these kind of scenes? So that's something I'm thinking a lot about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think we're a lot of people thinking about that.
And other things. I mean, when it comes to work environment, because it's not about menopause, but I also used to work as an actress, and I did lose a role because I had a baby at the time, because the male director didn't want to deal with that. It was too risky.
We're raising film Ireland. My colleagues were here now, but we are not. Well, actually, Jennifer is here, and she's, I can see the fumes coming out of her ears. But they are with mine. Yeah, so that's a major issue.
So that made me very angry. And so when I got to direct my own film, and this actress came in that was really right for the part, and she had a baby, and I was like, yes, I'm going to give her that opportunity. Yeah. And I was so happy that my female producer also was on board with that, you know.
Right.
And meaning that we would have pauses when she had to breastfeed, and we all would stop for that moment. But I thought that was a great message to give, and also this should be also considering menopause or other, you know, life happens.
Yeah.
And it should also happen on set.
Yeah. Thanks, yeah. Louise, can I come to you just quickly here, because I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. Am I all right?
You're all right.
Yeah. Because at the beginning, you know, you have your questions measured out, and then you just start opening your mouth, and, you know, you have people pinned here for 6 hours.
Got another 2 minutes.
So, Louise, I'm interested in maybe your method, because you're crew, right? Or would you be generally your art direction? Is it?
Art direction and production design, but yeah, I'm not shooting crew, but
okay, yes,
okay, actual crew.
So what about this idea of, you know, the male domination of the, I don't mean domination, the kind of world domination, but that it is a male dominated industry. Do you think that impacts on women's freedom in a way to be women, to be themselves? Because, you know, we all want equality, we won't revisit all that here, but like, women just have different challenges, different life experiences, different bodies. It isn't one size fits all. So is that harder when you're surrounded by a lot of...
I don't think it's necessary that we're surrounded by men. I think it's just that we're perpetuating this idea that we all have to kind of push forward in the workplace and not be seen as that we need special treatment or we need things to be a certain way to accommodate us. And I think that's partly due to the fact that men are, you know, they're not maybe having to take time off work to look after a child, or they're not the one that has to go and leave the workplace maybe when a child is sick, or they have to, you know, there's definitely that an idea that maybe the women we need maybe more special treatment or more kind of consideration in the workplace. And I think
is it that there's an idea, or is it a fact that we do?
Absolutely, I think it's an absolute fact that we do need more consideration, and we do need to take more time for ourselves. And I think it just seems that maybe we're potentially difficult, or you know, it comes across as kind of as that
An extra burden.
It's an extra burden. Yeah, so I think it's. And unfortunately, I have seen it. I've seen, you know, or overheard certain conversations, or what about so and so, or I think they have a child, or I think they have this, or I think they have that, or, you know, and people kind of do it. I think it's kind of seen as an innocent, you know, an oversight. But you know, I've heard this conversation take place, so it's kind of, you know, it's not a reality, and everybody just wants the quickest and the fastest way to get the job done in the best possible way, so they don't want to be seen to have to take or jump over hurdles for people, and unfortunately, I think that's kind of it is an issue.
Okay. Max, I want to come back to you. Do you think this conversation maybe does it depend to a large extent, your experience, or to some extent, on where you are working in the film industry? You know, the role, for instance, women I would have spoken to, if they had hiring responsibilities, if they were senior, if they were perhaps company ownership was part of their package. Their attitude, I'm not saying that they didn't experience all of these things, but their attitude would be a little lighter, because if a joke was to be made, and one could argue that why should there even have to be, they would feel free to say, I'm having one of those days now, lads, so just be aware. Do you know what I mean? But that would be a senior level. Is that quite different to a freelancer coming in, making their way? Maybe are there a different set of rules depending on where you're situated?
I do think there are different, I wouldn't use the word rules, but there's certainly different ways of behaviour and cultural expectations. And, you know, I am a company owner, so for me it's a very different situation. I like to think that when crew members come to me to say, listen, I have this, or I have this, or I have a caring responsibility, or I need to be facilitated, I like to think that I go, of course, absolutely. You know, but the big issue I think we have in this industry is its budgets are under increasing pressure. You know, it's hard to resource a lot of jobs at the minute, because it's so busy with the big network stuff coming in. It's the studio stuff. It's very difficult to resource projects, and you know, sometimes you do your best to hire on a positive discrimination type basis. You know, but. And I do think that we need to look at how we work as an industry. This thing of, you must be there at 8 o'clock for the call time, and you must stay until the camera, we've got to look at that, because we're excluding not only people who have caring responsibilities or people who maybe aren't feeling so well, we're excluding people who have neurodiversity, we're excluding people who, maybe have a 3-hour trek to get home because they don't have access to transport, So, we really do need to look at how we do that, and then we have to square that circle off with the pressure of the budgets, and the pressure of what's expected. And I don't have answers to that, and I don't think anybody has answers to it yet, because it's such a global problem. Like, it isn't just something that happens in Ireland; it's a global issue. I made a decision, particularly in commercials. There's a lot of pressure in commercials at the minute to shoot 14, 16-hour days, and I just go, no, we're not fucking doing that. It's not safe, it's not productive. you know, the maximum we will do is 12, you know, and the 12 hours has to include the full 1 hour lunch break, and it has to include the time for people to get in and get out, you know, because otherwise you're really, it's becoming unsustainable. And I think as well, one of the issues we also have is there's a lot of crew are under pressure financially, and they're taking those jobs, you know, both men and women, they're taking those jobs that are really putting pressure on them, because they're under financial pressure, you know, and we've got to figure out how do we fix that, you know, how do we fix that for everybody, and then create a more gentle culture in what we do, a more positive way of approaching the work, a more open set, and so that people can feel that they can come to the producer and say, listen, today I'm having a really bad day, I'm having hot flushes or whatever, and I need to be able to go, or my daughter's sick, I need to go pick her up from school, from crash, you know, and I think we have created a culture because of how our industry is structured, and also because of societal structures, to not make that possible. And we portray all of this all the time in what we do in films. You know, we do these films and dramas that, you know, go on about equality and societal change and all that, and then we don't do it ourselves, you know. And I think we've got to start figuring out how do we address that, and how do we reflect in our work culture what we're reflecting on the screen.
Yeah. Deborah, to what extent, do you want to add to that? I was just thinking in terms of the levels of power that maybe.
Well, I was just thinking as well, like from some of the conversations that we had from women that had on-set jobs, things that came up were definitely really long days, where we might be having things like joint pain and fatigue and insomnia. These are all really common symptoms as well. But there's a conversation I had with one woman in the States where she was speaking about being shooting on set in the sun without proper shade, and not being able to mention that she was having a hot flash, and the sort of horror of that, of giving herself away that she needed help. So that very much refers to what you're saying, Louise, about having to push through, to be mortified to say, actually, I'm going to need to take a break here. And the other thing, which is a really practical thing, which again comes across many different occupations. I've had conversations with people who are, really senior, figures in the financial industry versus, and down to, but alongside primary school teachers, right? Is access to bathrooms when you need them, and there's so much horror about the experience of having really heavy periods that you're not expecting flash periods, and bleeding through your clothes and not being able to deal with it. And that's come up so many times.
And people don't like to talk about that. There was one woman, without giving any detail, because anybody that Deborah and I would have worked for, obviously is completely anonymous, but working in very close quarters with a male crew, and having that sense, that floodiness, as described, it's just, and this woman would have had a greater degree of power than perhaps, we're talking about. It's very difficult, isn't it, to speak to it.
And that's very sort of thing about, some aspects of it are still really stigmatised, are still really taboo, and talking about hot flushes is like a really recognisable thing, because it's the thing that the screen sector has always kind of captured. We need to sort of point out the menopause women, we'll just see her doing this. Yeah. But then other physical symptoms like flooding, many women do not know what's happening to them when it happens, and it's terrifying. So bringing awareness to that is a really important step. And I did notice that there's a screen with light going on when I walked into the room. Rival would have done that recently.
Yes, God for Sally Wainwright. Yeah, that was referred in many ways. Yes. So just again, I'm just keeping an eye on Jade here. And
we're good. We've got like 15 minutes.
We've got 20 minutes, about 10 minutes.
That was.
Keep that is right. So look, coming to you, because I know your experience is a bit different, I'm just trying to tailor it. Let's just go to the representation thing for a minute. How important is it that we see certain things in our stories on screen. Do you know what I mean? Like that we're actually, so that we've talked about aging, and you know it is an issue, we could talk more about that. Maybe we will, seeing as Jade is giving us, seems to be giving us all kinds of leeway here. But do you know what I mean? To actually kind of, how important is it that we're watching, and that, you know, a woman going through menopause is a part of the character may refer to it, or maybe a thread through the storyline, that it's not a secret. Is it important, do you think, for everything that women experience to show up in that kind of way on screen?
Yes.
In some way?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. And I have the feeling that what we see of menopause often in films are making fun of it. It's hot flushes, it's, crazy kind of woman. So to see, if we don't see the nuanced way of female characters above 50 or whatever, it means that they are disqualified, they're not valid, which also reflects on life and society. So it's so important that we see these characters in film.
Why do you think we're not? Are we back to who's writing the stuff?
Yeah, and who is financing?
What's getting made?
Yeah. Because I just heard yesterday from an Irish broadcaster that there was this series called 3 Ages of a Woman or something. I haven't seen it. So it was the puberty, pregnancy, and then menopause. And the 2 first episodes got so good ratings. And then the menopause episode got very low ratings. So it means that maybe also women don't want to watch this. I mean, we're uncomfortable watching it.
But you see, menopause is being structured as decline. If it's something that you're afraid to own, because, like, I remember speaking to one actor who was saying, okay, I came in and we're talking the power thing here, this woman was coming back and was doing some work, and we had that brain fog thing. And she, when the comments she made, she was so afraid, the terror of actually not just forgetting the lines, but of those around thinking, oh, this Becky Owen one now is coming and she can't even remember her lines. So there's a whole lot of things where we are kind of hiding, concealing, and maybe then it's making us kind of self-conscious about it. Is that getting to the self-consciousness?
And I also think that women tend to have much bigger expectations to themselves than men. So that we need to give ourselves a slack and, okay, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to deal with it the way I am. And I just talked to a male colleague yesterday, and I was like, oh, I'm a little bit nervous to be part of this panel. And he was like, but you just answer the questions, it's easy. I think that's a good representation of it.
So, Louise, what do you think of some of those points? I mean, I can change on screen.
I think indeed you change on screen, and just as I was making some notes before, do my edition. For me, every time I see, menopause being portrayed on screen, TV, film, whatever, it always comes up with this kind of dramatic plot twist, this kind of thing that just happens in the narrative and somebody has to deal with it. Whereas in reality, for all of us, it's a lived experience, no matter what part or whatever time of your life it comes at, or how you're dealing with it, whether it's retrospectively or now I'm dealing with it in 2 different ways, I feel. But I do think it's an experience, and it's something that everyone is, it will happen to everybody, and we all need to kind of figure out that it's not just and maybe there is humour involved, there's humour everywhere, and it's fine to make fun of things, and it's fine to have that as part of it, but it can't just be the perfect joke, or it can't just be this thing that just, that the representation needs to be a bit more diverse, and I think the more represented it is, the more it normalises it for everybody. And we talk about it in the workplace, it becomes part of storylines, and everybody gets to kind of, that will take the taboo of it away as well. The more we're having conversations like these, I would just say to Jade, at our last meeting as well, that so many people have approached me before coming to this that I would never have a conversation with. And that's what it's part of. It's part of us normalising, in a sense, in the workplace, that we're talking about it, that we are understanding, with our colleagues, that everybody, seeing that maybe someone needs a bit of time off or someone needs to take a break to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's part of normalising, kind of, as we see it on screen, it will have normalised it first in the workplace.
Max, we're back in a way though, are we, to the question that a lot of things keep going back to see change in that way. And I know, like, it's not just a matter, obviously, of also, you know, somebody said to me one time, and I was sharing this with you, Jennifer Davison, you know, but your screenwriters have the power, they just should write the stuff and then the word will change. But we know it's not quite as, you know, so straightforward as that. But are we back, Max, to you need women in these key creative roles to help to steer change, whether that's writers, directors, producers, and I know that's not even maybe sometimes the full picture, but it does kind of come back to women being present in those important places, does it?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I mean, I would second a lot of what Louise was just saying there. You know, I think a big part of what we need to do to create cultural change and societal change is to generate our own knowledge, because by generating our own knowledge, we're generating power and we're creating power. And you know, and for us to do that, I think we have to have more women involved in the industry. We you know, and it's pretty hard. It's extremely hard to get women brought through. I mean, I was representing female directors 30 years ago. Couldn't catch them a cold, never mind a job, you know. And it's still hard, you know, because, and particularly I think here in a small society like Ireland, you know, when you, particularly in commercials, when you put a female director forward, an Irish one, they want to know, well, what's the show rate? They want the director with the big show rate, but they're not getting the opportunity here to build the show rate, you know. And then you get the other side of it where, you know, you'll have creative clients and advertising agencies and clients in the client side saying, you know, well, not only is the show rate not there, but they work in drama, and you're going, yeah, like, and you know, what's the difference? But they don't provide those same rules to young men coming through as directors, you know. So it's a very difficult situation to get more women involved, because it is not a woman-friendly industry. It's extremely unfriendly towards women, I think, you know, and it's a very hard situation to try to fix, and all we can do is do our best. And I do think we have to talk more, we have to be more open, we have to talk about what affects us and you know, how, and then support each other as well, you know, and insist on change, you know, and insist, like, you know, that I'm not going to be spoken to like that on the set, you know, I'm not going to tolerate that type of behaviour from anybody, and I'm not going to shut my mouth because you're uncomfortable, because right now I'm having vasomotor symptoms, or, you know, I'm about to have an out-of-body experience and blow my lid, you know, because my hormones have gone, I'm in a hormonal storm. I think we have to we have to step forward quite a bit, and I know we all suffer from imposter syndrome, I suffer from it myself, and maybe that's one of the solutions that we need to talk about, instead of just talking about, you know, menopause and periods and menstruation and all of that, to put it into the context of, we're not imposters, we deserve to be here, we deserve every skill that we have earned, we deserve every position that we get because of the skills that we've learned, and maybe it's about confidence built into that more people can step forward and refuse to step back just because somebody pushes them just that little bit, you know.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Deborah, any thoughts on that? I mean, I guess there's lots of industries, organisations, sectors that women are not visible in, but from what we're talking about, it's like, in theory, anybody can write a screenplay about anything, but the chances are you're going to get, you know, and it's not just in relation to gender, by the way, it's in relation to all kinds of experiences. We need those diverse voices, don't we, to bring different positions in, and we probably need, you know, older, middle-aged women, all kinds of age groups to reimagine.
Well, I was just sort of thinking something that we touched on earlier, I mentioned about, you know, we need to talk to women about, but also we need to talk to men. And it's really important that men are part of the conversation, and it's difficult to have those conversations with the male dinosaurs. But I was just sort of thinking, like, in terms of, like, you know, my household and this idea of, like, you know, generations changing, and that I mentioned how now we've kind of normalised talking about periods in a way which wasn't there when I was growing up. My daughter will not have the same experience of menopause, and as me, partly because of what I'm doing now, but because the culture is changing. But neither my son, so I think like my son's also growing up in a household where we talk about what menopause is. So I think it's really important that we're all participating in that as well. That if we're having those conversations with younger people across the board now, when they're growing up into their roles and their jobs and their professions, whatever it is in the future, maybe that's going to make a difference too. However, that takes time. I would like to see change like before then as well. Yeah.
Well, you're right, that is a hopeful thing. Although, well, no, I'm not going to alter that. I guess, on paper, things can change because we sometimes think that generation move will bring change, and sometimes you get a shock and it actually doesn't bring
absolutely.
change.
Yeah.
So I think it is
Can't take it for granted.
We have to keep pushing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any space for complacency when we are seeing something like painful. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I just want to get your thoughts on one final thing. Janicke, can we reimagine menopause as something positive, something that brings with it confidence, experience, being self-assured, all of that, rather than decline?
Yes. No, I think it's a good way to see menopause as the second coming of age, to see it that way. It's a transition to something new and positive. And all this is very inspiring as a filmmaker. And my next project is a group of women of all ages, and it's very inspiring how I built these female characters who are a little bit older. Yeah, so it's...
You're our kind of director. Louise, what do you think about reimagining?
Yeah, I think we have no choice. I think we have to. I think.
Or else we just stay quiet and the conversations fizzle out.
Absolutely, and I think there's so many. To talk about the art department alone, there's a huge percentage that are women, and we have no choice but to kind of look around the room who's in all different positions and different roles, and kind of understand the kind of from different ages that what they're going to go through the next kind of 10 years or for so many years, and be there to kind of support people and on a day-to-day basis, whether it's coming from a production level or not. That we are looking around the room at other colleagues in different roles and being there and kind of giving someone that look that's on a level of understanding. It doesn't have to come, and I don't know how it comes yet from a production level. I think that's something I know we're not going to get into. I don't know if we can. I don't know, how we get to that kind of the next level of that conversation, but I think it is more so that we're looking around the room at each other individually and kind of being there to support each other. I think that's...
The other thing, of course, is the workplace policies, which do exist in other areas. Are they, would they be helpful here? I know that the people that you talk to would kind of go, I can see the eye rolling already, and people are going to, yes, this is this, you know what I mean? But really, do we need... The other side of that is that, of course, if you have a workplace policy, you're acknowledging that this is a reality for some people, and that management have to kind of look at it and see it and respond to it. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't know if we're ready yet for it. I don't know where the policy comes in. Like, just for instance, in the last thing, I've seen a huge change from when I started to where things are now, and that's to do with kind of, millennial Gen Z, or people wanting the workplace to be different. Leave on time. They look at the clock, they pack their bag and they're gone. Whereas I would wait for someone to tell me when to go, So, it was kind of, things have changed. I also think it's, equal Me Too movement, people don't accept people talking to people a certain way. Everyone's watching, everyone's listening to what you're saying. And if you say something, maybe everyone would make a joke, but, it's not okay to make those jokes anymore. And I think in time, things like that. But there's been no policy change. That's just been sea change between us culturally and kind of what we've seen happen around the world. And that has happened. Never thought it would, and here we are. definitely has been positive change. There will still be down, yeah, and I think that part of that filtering down is this conversation that we're having, that we are now, as I said, I've talked to people since who've approached me, and I've, since we've had this conversation, and this, or since I've been online, or there's been kind of, kind of stuff on social media about this meeting that we're having, and people have approached me about it. So I think this will just filter down and down. I think that's how we do this a little bit of osmosis, and I think there will have to be maybe some policy changing, but and just to highlight something about bathrooms, it's a silly thing, but when you're on a job and you're in it with warm water, you're like, yes, it's such a big thing here, But I do think it depends on what side of the job you're on, what kind of production it is. There's definitely, hopefully, in the larger scheme of things, it won't matter about what kind of job you're on. That we're just globally having these conversations amongst each other, and that will just filter down.
Can we just go finally to Deborah and Max? Just a quick word on do you think workplace policies are a good thing? Can you envisage kind of what they might be? And secondly, can we be positive and reimagine menopause? Those two.
Well, I think the menopause policy thing is a really tricky one to understand. Because
you're not here to make your life easy, right?
Well, policies can sit in drawers and exist, but they only have purpose when people feel comfortable to draw them. So again, that's about changing the culture. But certainly, again, in terms of chipping away to show that employers do have to sort of acknowledge it. I'm not going to say no to them, but put it that way. In terms of things and how can things change, I do think they can. And again, I do want to sort of be positive as well in this conversation, which can often get quite dark, right? But it's possible to be positive as well. And I'm just sort of thinking, the wider picture here as well is like we live in a world of changing global demographics, right? People are living longer, more people are living longer. There was a thing in the UK a few years ago, an event that I was at, where they were saying that year, 1 in 3 people were going to live to 100, they think. This is before COVID, well, yes, we'll see. But, if that's the case, then, many women will spend half their life in a post-menopausal age. So, I have to hope that will mean we have to see more of their stories, and richer stories, and more diverse stories.
I'm going to answer the second one first because it feeds into what Deborah was just saying, and this is where I get controversial. So when I was doing my thesis, the whole thing looked like, the vast majority of us would be 50 years plus living with menopause and being postmenopausal. And I wonder, having read a couple of academics, published material, there's very little published on menopause, by the way. There's some feminist stuff that tends to be back in the 80s, 90s, and then anything recent tends to be very medicalised, So there's very little that's about what we actually have as a lived experience, which is what my thesis ended up being about, lived experience. But when I was reading it, and I was reading through these academic papers, there was a couple of people who had published, and I wonder, on a positive note for menopause, we're in quite a liminal space. We are no longer seen as fuckable. We're no longer seen as reproductive value, and in some respects we're almost defeminized, because you're no longer reproductive value, so you're defeminized and you become slightly masculine, but you're not really masculine, but you're not male, And is there a space for a new gender, which is for the menopausal women, where we take back the power and we become emancipated and we get some liberation going, and that's the controversial part of it. I haven't explored it much further than that, and it might be something I go back to. But in terms of other positivities around menopause, to be perfectly honest, I'm at a point now, I'm 57, I'm well past menopause, I don't give a fuck anymore, no fucks given. I'm just like, yeah, whatever, because, you reach that point when you become menopausal, there are lots of other physical benefits for it. It's such a joy not to have periods anymore, such a joy, but then there are all the downsides to it as well. I mean, there are only 3 species that experience menopause: chimpanzees, pilot whales, and humans, no other species, and nobody knows why that is, you know. So there's a lot of research that has to be done around what is going on in terms of menopause and what can we do to be more supportive. And I think a big part of it is big cultural change and big societal change. Workplace policies, I think they have a place. I'm just not sure that that's what's going to change the culture in terms of dealing with what we all experience in the workplace. I think workplace policies have their place, as Deborah said. I'm not sure that they will move things along fast enough. I think what will move things along faster is talking. And when doing my research, I came across the Irish Menopause on Facebook, which at the time had 53,000 menopausal women on it who were talking about their experiences. It was more educational for me than anything else that I read anywhere in the research. Some hilarious stuff, you know, women who were going through vasomotor symptoms, who were telling each other that the pet cooling mats were in an Aldi. It was a very hot summer. The pet cooling mats were in an Aldi and they were only €5 as opposed to the menopause cooling mats, which were €56, you know. And you know, like, I mean, it was a very uplifting and life-affirming process to have gone through, to have watched that. And unfortunately, the Irish Menopause on Facebook has pretty much been closed down because Meta won't allow them to discuss certain things, and they've pretty much closed it down. And that huge support network that was for women from all walks of life, and who, some women who were suicidal, they had so much going on in their lives that their anxiety was so crippling. Yeah, that support resource has gone. And I think that what will be more effective is to have a support network for women to be open and to be able to talk about it and to create our own cultural change, which then by osmosis, as Louise says, becomes a bigger societal thing.
Yeah, I agree, Max, yeah. So, more talk, more openness, you know, and really, yeah, I mean, we have long and interesting lives ahead post-menopause. I mean, it's not the definer, the full stop that perhaps it once might have been. So, thank you, Max, Deborah, Janicke, and Louise. Really enjoyed that discussion today, and a very, very sincere thanks to the NTA, to James Traveller, because this is supposed to be Thank you all for being a really interesting audience, and we're very receptive.
We might see if there's any questions.
We're going to go to that now.
I
see multiple.
Let me, I'm going back a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to go closest to the way back. Okay.
Thank you, great discussion and gorgeous data as well. Thank you to the NTA. So I just wanted to pick up on what you said, Max, about like how can we create a gentler structure. And I suppose this applies to the world I know, which is publicly funded film and TV. And I suppose one of the things I think is that, like having done a job last year where I was director of the TV series, I felt, I can genuinely say this, the Irish crew were incredible, across the board, men, women, younger, older. I had to check myself one time because we had a very old spark and he was taking the DOP and I used to jump and go, look, he's taking forever to cross with that wire. And of course we wanted the grey-haired young spark that we were meant to have who got a more lucrative job. And then it was like, take this moment, you know, value the older person with an experience. And so I feel like the perception, I saw lots of men hugging on set, men taking time to massage each other. I felt like it was really evolving. But I suppose for me the thing is, I think it comes down to values, that it's, you know, productivity for return. And so how do we, it's about money and power and money, and, you know, how can we get, like, should Desiree be on these panels? You know, who's on the boards? If it's publicly funded money, I think the reason why a woman with a baby doesn't get a job, either he's a misogynist or financially he's worried that your caring duties is taking your focus and your time in this productivity world away from his future, his baby, right? So we need to then value the cost of having a mum and being a HOD as a production designer, and that's a value. So it has to be money that's set aside.
It's always money.
A condition of funding, you know, and we have Screen Ireland getting more money than they've ever had. What's the budget this year, Susan? Like it's
big, yeah.
It's high. So we've all of the talking, we've all of the supports, but where is the push from the power brokers to actually put a value on that? And that, like, so there's a producer saying, like, who am I going to hire for this job? Actually, there's a fund there which we can tap into, which means I can work with Louise or whoever and sort of in a
pocket. Do you mean a fund where women who have a child would have childcare, or what is it that you're?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. Like, so it could be that, like, there's a fund that if the working day needs to be different because someone has to go to appointments, and that could be for the menopause or it could be for childcare. But I think it's all the things that put us out of that 16-hour structure. And that's a whole, like, that's a gentler structure is having different values, which is about self-care and gentleness. And the problem is, in the high productivity world we're in, that means the person who's younger faster, maybe doesn't have kids or isn't going through the menopause or hasn't a caring duty, will take that job, and the other person will.
So is it more flexibility it requires? More by a degree of flexibility you're talking about?
Subsidy, is it? I mean, in my own experience, childcare, finding it, resourcing it, was really hard, and then it's incredibly expensive to do privately. So, and it takes time, and that's labour, and that is not part of the production, that falls to you. I think it's money, yeah, and like I think that if there was a fund that said...
There's a couple of different, there's a job share scheme that's been run by Raising Homes Ireland, and there's also a pot of money called Pathways, who have supported people who've gone back to work and supported them through childcare and stuff. So there are a couple of...
I think it's much bigger than that, what we need. I think it's like structural. I think it should be a policy with working with the government, that this is a deep core value in our society, because, yeah, like, I see what you mean, I know what you're saying, but it's not nearly enough. And also, like, as producers want to, I just know as a director, the jobs that are being offered is like, they want one person to do a lot of episodes, so there isn't that flexibility for a lot of us, in the sense of that's the meanness of the industry. It wants the best, quickest, hardest return, and that will, if you're talking about people trickling out, it will. It's about power and money, I think. Yeah.
Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I don't have an answer. And it's a very difficult circle to square, or square to circle, and I think it definitely needs a funding, it needs a cultural change in terms of how we work, and I keep coming back to poor old Jim Core, who was buried yesterday, and I think that it possibly needs to be wrapped into the whole area of sustainability. We've kind of taken this thing of that sustainability is just about environmental. We're not looking at it in terms of ESG, and in terms of the sustainability of the industry. And the industry right now is not sustainable because we're losing too many people who are highly skilled, we can't retain them, and we're not retaining them because the working conditions aren't acceptable. And we're ending up with young people coming in who don't have the skill set that Louise has, that people in this room have, and we need to figure out a way to retain people, and if that means changing how we work, then we need to do that. And I think it needs to be wrapped up into sustainability, and that is possibly a question of funding, it's possibly a question of government policy. I mean, the reality of it is our government, nobody can get a house right now, nobody can get childcare, so it's not just our industry, it's across the board, But we can affect change quicker and faster because we show things, and societal change, I think, comes about from when you show things on a screen that there is a better way.
Carla?
I just wanted to follow up on your thing about policy change. Policy change, like you're saying, doesn't necessarily make changes that are progressive. There's often a kickback. And I was just referencing in Japan, they call menopause konenki, excuse my Japanese, and that means stage of renewal. So we need to reframe our menopause as a stage of renewal. We're always pushing for emerging talent, for young filmmakers. I think that positively pushes all wisdom and all the experience that women of a certain age have out of the frame. Is there some way that Screen Island could create another roster of women who have been in the business who perhaps haven't forged through, their voices haven't been heard? Is there another sector in it that could encourage women who've been in the business for a good while but are invisible to be seen and be heard?
Yeah, I think I'll just answer that myself. I just think that's a great question. And I have a loud voice. I don't think so in Women in Film Television Ireland, we have made this a central thing. I mean, our Greater Later event every year is focused on women over 40. We talk all the time about the importance of women over 40. I think that, you know, there was a time when I tried to maybe bring on board a conversation about maybe a fund specifically for women who definitely fell by the wayside in previous times. There's no doubt about that. We did lose a lot of women. But I think that there is an openness to seeing women of any age as an emerging voice. I think it may be our problem to think of emerging talent as being young talent. I certainly don't, I have to say. But I understand that very often the industry is looking for the next best thing, the next hottest thing. But I 100% agree with you. I think that we've lost an enormous amount of talent. A generation that none of these initiatives were there for, and we've lost people. I do agree with that. Sorry, Deborah.
I was going to say, there is a group in the States based out of LA, I can't remember the name, but I'm sure you can find them, who is a group of women, mostly directors, I think, but who exactly come together because of this issue that they were saying when we were kind of working in the 80s, 90s, there was no way in, it was all, you know, jobs for the boys. And now, all the kind of initiatives that are out there are for young women, so we're excluded again. And so there is a group in the States that are particularly trying to shine a light on that issue. Yeah. I can't remember the name, but you'll find it.
Patricia?
Yes, just thank you very much for an interesting panel discussion. I'm a bit of a fan of Brenda Leffin, the actress in Vera, who retired this year from the long-term series, most popular detective series in Japan, very popular in the UK as well. And I think she's a bit of a feminist icon and a trailblazer in terms of, you know, you accept her on her terms. She made a film this year called Dragonfly, which is amazing, speaking up for older women being cared with home cares. But I suppose I just reflecting on what people talked about, flash floods and about, you know, overheating, and the woman as a metaphor for the planet. And I think the Dalai Lama, I know he got himself into trouble a while back, but he did talk about women being the new world leaders, and that we really do need to seize our power, and we need to speak truth to power, because the planet is melting. And I do think this concept of the good enough older woman needs to be really embraced. The concept of menopause is almost in some ways derogatory, a pause. You know, maybe we need to reframe it as a portal or something like that. I know Manicon McGann, who passed away this year, talked about the portal, the woman's portal. You know, we are kind of a portal for all kinds of things and creativity and expression. And I think we really need to seize that as a community. Thank you.
I'd say one last question before we wrap. Yeah, perfect.
Hey, thanks everyone. It's great to be in this room. I just wanted to kind of, I love to share ideas about kind of some sense of other kinds of gender or non-binary, and the fact that it's controversial but interesting. It's even often talked about bathrooms, right? We have trans conversations I'm having with friends and so on. And I suppose allyships with men as well. It's like this is also a man's issue, right? Rather than just keeping it in the woman's room or the woman's problem or the woman's issue to have to be dealing with. But yeah, I was just picking up on Eamon's point. I think it is like, to talk about it is great, but it is about actually subsidising and putting money to value, I suppose. And I was just thinking, like, you know, paid maternity, paid period leave, paid menopause leave. So in 8-hour day, if you need it with the 12-hour pay, and the production is getting the subsidy, and I guess it's a capitalism, needs socialism model, which is, you know, we have full socialism. That's kind of where we're kind of at-ish at times.
So I think that's it, because I mean, our industry is kind of subsidised anyway, in different ways, through state government and government. It's not a full cashless model, so why not like just draw on that and fight for that subsidy, and it's like very straightforward, like unionise, organise. That's what I can say.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we could be here all day, we go talking about that. I know. And really, it always comes back to power and money. Every conversation that I've ever had, it always comes back to that. And, you know, what do you prioritise? And, you know what I mean? I hear you, and I think we all wish we had an answer, or, you know, we could tie all this up. I can only say, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, but, you know, I've never been shy shouting for things. And I think there's loads left to shout for, but I just think every now and again we do need to stop and go, we actually, especially if you're comparing with what's going on elsewhere, we have actually come a bit of a ways here, and I think that we can go further. But I actually feel more confident that we can actually go further here, because I actually think our mindset now in the Irish film industry is a good one. But I think we have to push for those extra things, because nobody is going to come along and say, do you know what, here's a pot of money, because we've kind of been thinking about it. So I think everything that's needed has to be vocalised, and we all have a role in that actually, because it's the people who are calling out for things. They're the annoying voices. We always need those annoying voices.
It's not a minority.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, MTA, thank you, Jade, thank you, the panel.
Thanks a million, everybody. It's been absolutely amazing to have you here and to have these conversations. And yeah, let's keep pushing for more of these conversations and the changes we want to see. That's it.